Guys, good morning, good afternoon, magandang tanghali o magandang hapon sa inyo lahat. Welcome po sa ating channel, sa ating vlog, sa Palagay Mo. So welcome po tayo. Ito po ang lugar na kung saan we can talk about yung ating mga pananampalataya, yung ating Kristyanismo, yung ating church, so simbahan. Pwede nating pag-usapan dito at pwede rin kayong magtanong sa mga katanungan na madalas iniiwasan, Pero ito, pwede natin pag-usapan yung mga katanungan na iniiwasan ng mga, alam niyo na, dito sa sinasabi nating buhay Kristiyano natin. At siyempre, nandito tayo not to judge, but to understand the truth, Hindi tayo dito, bawal po ang judgmental, Bawal po ang judgmental dito, hindi tayo narito para manghusga. At wala tayong karapatan na mag-judge, Sa mga sa mga kapatid natin sa Panginoon o sa sino man na naniniwala sa Diyos, So let's think deeper and go back to the Word and learn together, Let's go deeper to the Word and learn together. At hopefully ay sa ating pagsasama-sama ay ito po, ulitin ko, tanong muna bago husgahan. Tanong muna, magtanong po tayo, saligsigin po natin bago tayo maghusga. At sa pagkakataong ito ay ito, gusto ko lang magbigay tayo ng sama-samang reaksyon o opinion dito po sa ating panonoorin. Ito actually si Tom. Tuloy na po natin ito, pakinggan na po natin ang dalawang ito,
Well, I am so excited today. Dr. Tom Wadsworth is here with me on the Beyond Sunday podcast. How you doing, Tom?
Great, David. Good to be with you.
So, Tom, I can't think of a more controversial topic to talk about than what we're going to talk about today. Your doctoral dissertation, a lot of your research has been about how the New Testament does not use worship language to describe the Christian assembly. And I can imagine even people listening right now are like, what? What are you talking about? What is this heresy that we're about to discuss? But I want to start with this, Tom. What led you to study this topic? And then can you unpack a little bit about what you mean?
Yeah, great question. It started in 1977, David. I was in my first year of full-time pulpit ministry, and I was preaching through 1 Corinthians. And on the 14th week, I'd been taking one chapter at a time. The 14th week, I'd come to chapter 14. I'd never preached on 1 Corinthians 14 before. Frankly, I hadn't paid much attention to it before because it deals with speaking in tongues. And in the church culture in which I was paid at the time, they didn't anybody was skipping over.
So, sinasabi niya yung 1 Corinthians chapter 14, nung ito ay pinag-aaralan niya, punta siya dun sa speaking tongues. Ganun, kasi nga, siguro, hindi sila Pentecostal, naniniwala sa speaking tongues. Kaya sabi niya, iyaanin niya sana to. Hindi niya na titignan, kasi nga, siyempre, ganun iba yung iba yung paniniwala niya. Pero ito niya pa rin ang pag-aaral niya din sa 1 Corinthians chapter 14. Okay, guys, study
chapter, but I thought there must be something here. And so
I was raised in the Assemblies of God, so I know all about speaking in tongues.
You got it. And if you know the 70s, the late 70s, this was very controversial. And the speaking in tongues phenomenon was creeping into lots of different denominations, not just the AG churches, but or Pentecostal churches, but it's going elsewhere, and there was meeting some resistance. But so I started to go through 1 Corinthians 14, tried to take it as I try to do all passages from a clean slate And let's just see what Paul is saying here. And this chapter is the longest chapter in the Bible that deals specifically with the Christian assembly. I mean, it contains way more information about the Christian assembly than any other passage anywhere in the Bible. It probably contains 10 times as much information about the Christian assembly. And I noticed that this one particular Greek word popped up 7 times. And the Greek word is oikodome, which means edification, building up of one another. And in verse 26, Paul comes to this big conclusion. He says, "What then, brethren? When you come together, let all things be done for oikodome, edification." Whoa. All right, that's interesting. Now, what hit me when I was studying for this sermon was, wait a minute. I thought everything we did in the worship service was for the worship of God. I mean, we had our acts of worship that we went through. We had an order of worship. We had a house of worship. We had worship services. We opened worship with this. Then later on, we closed worship with that. And churches have their worship pastors and their worship team and their worship time. Worship, worship, worship. It's throughout our vocabulary. And then I started to dig deeper into what that word, how that word is used throughout the Bible. Genesis, that language that we have is in fact foreign to New Testament Christianity. That doesn't mean it's wrong and you're going to go to hell if you use the word worship. I'm not saying that at all, but it is in fact foreign. They would not have talked in such terms. Their gatherings were, in fact, horizontally focused on one another for the purpose of building up one another, oikodome. And it's not just 1 Corinthians 14 that bears this out. This is found in numerous places where Christian assemblies are mentioned. Now, nothing I've said so far implies or means that we don't sing praises to God when we get together. Nothing I've said so far means that they didn't pray to God in their gatherings. They did. But what is a remarkable biblical fact is none of these Greek or Hebrew words for worship are ever used in reference to prayer or singing praises. This is our language. This is our terminology. It is not, in fact, the terminology of first century Christians. So that's where it came from. And then I kept studying this issue since 1977, over and over again, digging up literatures as much as I could, going back into church history. I mean, I really studied this thing. And finally, in 2016, I decided, well, enough. I'm going to take these conclusions and enter into a PhD program in New Testament and throw these conclusions that I've come to, as wacky and as crazy as they may seem, throw them up against a PhD wall and see what sticks. Well, they stick. Now, I have refined some thoughts over the years, for sure, and then deepened understandings in other ways over the years. But I'm now ready to take the show on the road, so to speak. And after I got my PhD in 2022, I delivered some public lectures on this topic. They were videotaped and posted to YouTube. And those videos that I have on my YouTube channel now, as of last week, David, have been viewed over 1 million times. It's really causing a stir. Some people are upset. Some people are writing me off as yet another wacko. But largely, more than 90% of people are saying, wow, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now everything makes sense. I've had problems with these things for a long time, but finally you provided the biblical evidence that is clear and hard to refute. And now I get it. So that's where we are. That's where it came from, David.
Yeah. Tom, 1977, worship at that time looked a lot different than it does in 2025. And I want you to reflect on what you've seen. So I was born in 1984. So you were kind of studying this even before I was on this earth. But today, worship is a very big deal. I've been a worship pastor, Tom, my full-time job. It's not what I'm currently doing, but that's how I got into ministry. So worship is a career path. Worship is an industry where there are artists and songwriters who make significant revenue within an industry of worship.
So yung nagsasalita rito ay interview po ay isang worship leader. So, ang ministry niya, yan, nandun yan sa worship. So, hopefully, marami siyang katanungan dito. Kasi nga worship leader siya. So, yun nga. Tingnan po natin, tuloy po natin guys. Very interesting thing to dahil yung pong kausap niya ay isang worshiper, matatawag natin worshiper sa isang simbahan, sa isang iglesia. At ngayon po, ito, tinatanong niya yung si...
To our gatherings in most churches, I'll say in America, but most likely around the world, worship in song is the centerpiece. Was that part of your desire to get this research kind of out into the open because you saw sort of how worship had become something so big?
Yeah, that's true. I've always known since 1977 that these conclusions are revolutionary and also would be deemed as heretical, as mine were back then. But something happened in the late 90s, David, that took this worship perspective, this worship model of a Christian assembly, and put it on steroids and launched it into the stratosphere. It's where it's now all we think about or talk about when it comes to the assembly. And that was the advent of the worship.
Oh, yeah.
Contemporary worship was seen as opposing traditional worship, and churches would split. And sometimes the early service would be contemporary and the late service would be traditional, or vice versa. A lot of people left churches at that time to go to a church of their choosing that got the music that they liked. But the worship terminology really took off then to a much greater degree than it was in the 80s and 70s and 60s and 50s. And I can trace this going back a long, long ways, actually to AD 33. I've had plenty of time to study this thing. So yeah, that's what happened there. It really got to be a thing in the 90s.
Yeah. What's at stake, Tom? Like, I can hear some people thinking, like, what's the big deal? Why do you hate worship so much? What's at stake if we ignore this research and we just sort of keep doing what we're doing? What are we missing out on when worship and maybe celebrity-driven stages in our gatherings kind of continue? What's at stake?
Yeah, you're almost answering your own question there, aren't you, David? The celebrity-driven stuff. Well,
throwing that in there.
Nice little jab. What's at stake here is, again, to put your mindset in first century and these gatherings. They didn't call it services. They didn't call it worship services. They had gatherings. And the Greek word is ekklesia, church. It's an assembly. It's a gathering. That's what church was. Now, our English word church throws us off bad there too, but they had assemblies where they got together to build up one another. And in these gatherings, one anothering was intensive. There was multiple people participating. We have this idea, well, you get the preacher going up there behind the pulpit and delivering his sermon for 40 minutes, and then we'll have our worship session led by our worship team for 30 minutes, But if you want to think in first century terms, forget about all that. Just get it out of your head.
Wow.
Rather, in order to get yourself in a first century mindset, put yourself in somebody's living room. Because these are house churches. Don't put yourself in a 1,000-seat auditorium or a 10,000-seat auditorium. Put yourself in a small venue like that, like a home. Don't think in terms of firmly fixed pews all facing east or facing toward the pulpit. Think in terms of couches where people are facing one another. Think in terms of a gathering where there's maybe no more than 20 people there. Think also in terms not of just one person dominating with a long oration that he has prepared during the week. Rather, think in terms of multiple people speaking, people comforting one another, encouraging one another, praying for one another, confessing their sins to one another. All these one another's are very strong in the New Testament. I think there's something like 58 one another's, one another in activities, and they're largely referring to assembly activities. So to put our head in a first century mindset, think in terms of a house gathering where everybody gets to talk, and the point of everything of what we're doing there is to build one another up. And probably another feature of this gathering is as you're sitting there in the living room, you can smell a meal being prepared in the kitchen as the odors and the aroma starts wafting in as the gathering, because they're going to have the Lord's meal. We call it the Lord's Supper. The Greek word is deipnon, which means supper or meal. Don't think in terms of this miniaturized thing where we have a little piece of cracker and a little shot glass of juice or something.
Guys, tatapusin muna natin dito. Paano natin tutuloy sa susunod pa natin mga video. Itong ginagawa natin reaction dito sa why the early church did not have worship service. Hopefully na bago tayo mag-react ng ano man tuloy-tuloy po natin yung painggan po yung sinasabi nito ni Dr. Tom Wadsworth. Saliksikin po natin maigi yun, lalo na yung tinatawag natin gathering ng early church, so yung assembly of the early church. So guys, thank you for watching. Salamat po sa inyong panonood at isasamahan niyo po ulit ako at patuloy tayong gagawa ng vlog o video patungkol dito. Sige guys, isang like and subscribe lang, masaya na po tayo. Again, thank you for watching. God bless you. Bye. Bye.